All right, Mets fans. Very unfortunate breaking news report here. Jacob deGrom has been shut down for 4 weeks with a shoulder injury. He will miss the start of the season, and all hope is lost. Maybe not entirely when you have Max Scherzer and Chris Bassitt, but this is certainly a big blow to this Mets team. And I will tell you all about it in this very unfortunate bonus edition of Locked On Mets.
You are Locked On Mets, your daily New York Mets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello to all you amazing Mets fans. You're watching Locked On Mets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Ryan Finkelstein. If you want to find any of my work, follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. You can also find some of my writing at justbaseball.com, where I unfortunately just wrote an article about Jacob deGrom's injury. And here's what happened. Found out yesterday there was some shoulder tightness when deGrom threw long toss. They decided to put him into an MRI tube today, and it revealed a stress reaction on his scapula in his throwing shoulder, which caused inflammation to the area. The Mets will now shut him down for 4 weeks before putting him in for another MRI and seeing if that has cleared up. Very unfortunate news. No way around it. deGrom looked healthy, and I had to eat crow here. I said he looked great. I saw him in person last Sunday. I said I wasn't worried about the injuries anymore. I talked about the fact that deGrom throughout his career has been very durable. Yet, if you look at last season and even a little bit at the end of the 2020 season, there has just been these lingering issues that pile up and pile up and pile up. And I do think that they are exacerbated a bit because deGrom is so valuable. You just don't let him pitch through anything. Whereas maybe in the past, someone like Jacob deGrom wouldn't be mentoring, the shoulders tightness and would pitch through it. And you just might not hear about as many injuries. So maybe this picture gets painted a little bit more severe that these injury woes just continue and that he's just this injury plagued pitcher. But even with all that said, even if it isn't as bad as it maybe appears on the surface, the reality is you're not going to see him at the start of this season. And you look at the timetable on this, he's got to start over now with this throwing program. So, opening day next Thursday, 4 weeks from now, hopefully MRI comes clean and then he can get back to his throwing program. And if everything breaks right for the rest of the season, deGrom's healthy. But even with that, mid-May, earliest you would see him. And that would probably be if he still is stretching out at the big league level. They get him up to maybe 4 innings and they say, all right, that's enough. We're going to let you stretch out at the big league level because we want deGrom on the mound striking out hitters. But that is, again, if everything breaks right, more likely, I don't think you see deGrom until June. And the Mets can get by, but that really does just sap the potential of this team. It doesn't mean that it's over. And I'm already seeing Mets fans back where they're most comfortable, jumping off the bridge, letting go of the rope. This franchise is cursed. It's all over for us. The season shouldn't even start. Go out and trade for more guys. We gotta, it's doomsday. And I get it. I'm feeling it myself. I could not believe that once again we're in this position where Jacob deGrom won't be available to the Mets. But if you look at what the Mets did this offseason, it was, of course, about the dream of pairing Max Scherzer and Chris Bassitt with Jacob deGrom. But really, what those two additions did is it allowed you to be able to not have this injury cripple your season. That's the whole point. That's why Steve Cohen looked at the market and Billy Epler, and they saw Robbie Ray and Kevin Gausman. They saw Marcus Stroman. They saw some of these names out there in free agency who would be very capable number twos. Even Carlos Rodon is another example of that. And what did they do? They said, no. There's an ace on the market. We don't know if we're going to have our ace this season. So we're going to give Max Scherzer whatever he wants, which ended up being $43.3 million to be that ace. Max Scherzer, there's not health concerns right now. I'm going to knock on wood on that, but he's throwing 90 pitches in spring. Looks ready to go. He's going to start opening day for the Mets. just as capable as Jacob deGrom to go out and shut out the Nationals over a full game. Actually, more capable because he's more available and more stretched out to go out and just dominate that opening day. And moving forward, he is more than capable, if deGrom never returns this season, to be the ace that carries this team, that gets him through all of these months and can get them where they need to go. He's done it before with the Nationals. And so there's no reason to think this Mets team can't win. And there's more pressure now on the lineup. There's more pressure on Chris Bassitt as the number 2. There's way more pressure on Carlos Carrasco or Taijuan Walker to establish themselves as the number 3. And there's also now pressure on Billy Epler to keep his options open, because now the Mets might have to make another addition midseason. But you don't have to do that right now. You don't have to jump off a cliff right now, because this Mets team, they're still in position here. They can still get by in these early parts of the season. It's just going to take a little bit more from everybody else than we were expecting. And the absolute ceiling of this team certainly drops off a bit. But if the goal is to get into the postseason with Jacob deGrom, Max Scherzer, and Chris Bassitt healthy, that did not take a hit today. That's still a very good possibility down the road. The Mets are just going to have to be even more careful with Jacob deGrom, and hopefully whatever's going on with his arm, they can figure it out and get him into a good place by that point of the season. It's just very frustrating. I do want to talk a little bit more about the Mets' other options, because Tyler McGill now, enters center stage a little bit more as, I think, the clear-cut favorite to be the 5th starter. But I'll talk about who else could factor into that role and what the Mets do from here. We'll get to that a little bit more in just a minute. But first, I want to tell you, it is that time of year again. We are entering the final weekend of the college basketball tournament, and BetOnline is there from all the latest odds, contests, and player props. It is your number one source for all of your sports betting needs and info. They also have all of the future bets up. I would not take Jacob deGrom to win the Cy Young anymore. Certainly, I would look at Max Scherzer now having a better chance to win the Cy Young, as well as other things you can bet on, like Pete Alonso to lead the league in home runs, Chris Bassitt over under win total. There's a lot there that you can look at. You can also listen to our show on Thursday breaking down all of the odds BetOnline has for the Mets this season. It's not just about baseball, though. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information needs, including live betting and your favorite Vegas casino games. So head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in the action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, so without Jacob deGrom, the 5th spot in the Mets rotation is open, and Tyler McGill likely slots in to start the season. He was definitely better than David Peterson last year. Peterson, of course, dealt with a lot of injuries. That's what kept him out throughout that entire second half. But when he was on the mound, he was not very effective. Tyler McGill at least showed flashes last year. You had 5 starts in July where he pitched to a 1.05 ERA. That really showed his ceiling at the time. It fell off from there down the stretch in his final 10 starts after July, pitched to a 6.13 ERA. But a couple of things could explain that performance. For one, if you look at his expected fielding independent pitching, his xFIP, it was below 4 for those final 10 starts. So that tells you he had some bad luck. But also, this is a pitcher that had never thrown more than 35 and 2/3 innings in a single professional season. And he jumped all the way up to 130 innings. If you remember at the end of last season, if you were listening to this show, I started to wonder why the Mets weren't shutting down McGill, because I just felt like it was a huge innings jump and the season was already lost at that point. I was nervous they were going to hurt this guy by throwing him out there for those last couple of starts. But Tyler McGill was able to take the ball. He came through that season healthy. He had a healthy offseason, and he looks to be the clear guy right now. And he does have the potential, with a 6'7" frame, averaging 95 miles per hour. He is able to do a lot for this team. He can strike out a lot of batters, almost 10 per 9 last year. Really interesting pitcher that could pop. And he has this real X factor going into the season where you could see Tyler McGill really establish himself and be the guy for the Mets. Maybe he could have a better season than Carlos Carrasco and a Taijuan Walker. And when Jacob deGrom is ready to return, maybe somebody else is getting pushed from that rotation. That's how good this guy could be. I am still very high on him. He went into last season in the minors just mowing people down with the fastball. He didn't really have any secondary pitches. he worked on that slider. He worked on that changeup. If I'm not mistaken, he also is trying to add a cutter this offseason. This is one of these pitchers that is super raw, that is getting more and more refined with each season. And I think he could actually be a really nice option for the Mets. The bottom line, though, is you need more out of Carlos Carrasco. You need more out of Taijuan Walker. That back three is suspect. I'm not concerned about Scherzer and Bassitt. I expect him to take the ball every fifth day. I expect him to be very effective. Carlos Carrasco is a pitcher that you just don't know about. Is he going to be that guy that he was in Cleveland in 2020 when he pitched the 2.91 ERA? Or the guy that he was from 2014 through 2020, where you look at his stats and he was a top 15 starting pitcher in baseball. He was way underrated throughout a lot of the stages of his career in Cleveland. He dealt with an arm injury, he dealt with the cancer, he came back, then he had the blown hamstring last year. He's gone through a lot recently, but if he can finally get healthy this year, and he is healthy right now, this is still a pitcher that has a lot that I like. He still has an idea of what he's doing out there, really good IQ. He knows how to get batters out. I think that the stuff really didn't show to be diminished last year, even though he didn't have the results you would have liked. I think that was more just a matter of him never being comfortable. And I think that's evident with the fact that he continued to get rocked early in games and then would seemingly get better as those starts went on. I just think that there's going to be a much better Carrasco this season. Taijuan Walker did have surgery on his knee to clean things up this offseason. So maybe that explains why I pitched that 7.13 ERA in the second half. But one of those two guys, I said coming into the year, had to pop or had to not pop, had to bounce back. And now I think both of them do. And if it's one of the two of them and the other one struggles this season, then that puts even more pressure on a McGill to pop and break through and have a really big season. And outside of McGill, you of course have Peterson, as I mentioned. Trevor Williams is another option. This is a pitcher that has over 100 MLB starts, career 4.42 ERA. He's a suitable fifth starter. I just don't know if he's necessarily a suitable fifth starter on a juggernaut of a team like we expected the Mets to be going into this year. The road definitely got a lot tougher. And if you listen to the show or the first show today, you heard me talking about the importance of getting off to a fast start. That becomes a lot more difficult without Jacob deGrom, but not impossible. The pressure is on this lineup, which right now doesn't have any injuries or concerns, to go out and to hit the ground running. And then you hope that with deGrom and Bassitt carrying the load and some of these depth options working out, this Mets team will be fine. But there's no sugarcoating a Jacob deGrom injury. And until we learn more, until we see what happens with his next MRI, it casts a shadow over this season. It just does. And so the hope is that Jacob deGrom can, pitch and be strong throughout the entire second half and be healthy for the playoffs. But who knows? It's just a huge question mark that continues to, again, plague this Mets team. Anyway, that's going to be all for Locked On Mets this week. I said that earlier on the first show today. We'll see if that stands true, if there's no news that comes out throughout the weekend. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you follow, rate, and review wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at Finkelstein Ryan. Follow the show at Locked On Mets. Thank you for making Locked On Mets your first listen every day. Now for your second listen, check out Locked On MLB, hosted by Paul Francis Sullivan, but we call him Sully. Locked On MLB is where you want to go to stay up to date with everything going on in Major League Baseball and also to look back at some of the best moments of the past. You can follow Locked On MLB wherever you get podcasts.